This fish is actually 100 fish. That's the name of this presentation. It's a pretty good presentation if I do say so myself. Okay, so before we start this, let me be clear. This is all, well, it's not all based in my opinion and theory. It's primarily based in my opinion and theory, but there are a lot of interesting and scientific evidence used in the presentation as well. The idea is this fish is 100 fish. See this guy right here? You can't really see him here. Let me help you see him better. See him right there? He's actually 100 different fish. Now I want you to take a second to think about this. How is that thing 100 different fish? Yeah. This title feels like a bright side video. Nope, you'll understand soon. That's actually 100 fish right there. So let me introduce you to this fish, which is actually 100 fish. This is the slimy sculpin. Catus cognatus. Look at their range. Look at the range. This is their range. And they're in Russia too, by the way. They range from all the way down in Virginia, all the way up through Maine, through Canada, all the way up to this part of Canada, all the way up through this part of Canada, all the way through Alaska, and in Siberia in Russia. One species. Keep in mind, this is not like, oh, there's the sculpins, you know, the sculpins are throughout this area. There is one species, supposedly, that ranges through this entire area. And this is a picture I took of one's face yesterday because I wanted to get some good pictures for this presentation. And I love how funny their faces are. So say hello to him. This is a slimy sculpin. But here's the weird thing about it. For a fish with a range this large, think about how much land this is. They're sedentary. They sit mostly still under rocks in flowing water. They don't move much in their entire life. In fact, most of the slimy sculpins that I have caught in my life have been from isolated pools that I have caught them in consistently every year, meaning they haven't gone anywhere. So how does a singular species, which is mostly sitting in one place, being sedentary, have this large of a range? How does it spread this far and into Russia? How does that possibly occur? Well, scientists wondered that too, because how does that happen? It's a little weird, don't you think? And so they looked at a specific area. So this little dot here is basically southern Pennsylvania into the Maryland area. And they just looked at the slimy sculpins in this area. So at the time that this study was done in about 2000, this was all still just considered slimy sculpins. This entire gigantic range is just slimy sculpins. And they decided to look at one tiny little part of it, just one tiny little section. And what they found was enough genetic differences to make 2 new species out of just that little area. Just this little area that they checked, they found they could make 2 new species. There were in fact not slimy sculpins. So it was added the Blue Ridge sculpin and the Potomac sculpin. So now, in just this little area in southern Pennsylvania, northern Maryland, there are 2 new species that came from the slimy sculpin, the Potomac and the Blue Ridge sculpin, okay? And so then, it raises a certain question, but first, they weren't done, actually. The Potomac sculpin then got split again. So they took the slimy sculpin in just this tiny little area in southern Pennsylvania and northern Maryland and said, actually, the ones here are a Potomac sculpin and a Blue Ridge sculpin. And then another study did work and said, actually, this Potomac sculpin is actually a Potomac sculpin and a checkered sculpin. Meaning that just in that tiny area that they studied so far, they made 3 new species. And when I say they made, I mean they described. They already existed. These are unique species that cannot interbreed with the slimy sculpin. So all of this giant range that is meant to be all slimy sculpin, just by focusing on a little bit of it for a second, just by doing some genetic work for a tiny section of time, they split it into 3, or I guess 4 different species if you include the slimy sculpin in that area. So it makes you wonder, if we assume equal species diversity, if we assume for just a second, and I know this isn't exactly how, species diversity and radiation works, but imagine if every area we looked at had the diversity of this little area that we looked at right here in the southernmost range, basically, of the slimy sculpin. If we put a dot that size in the entire slimy sculpin range and assume that the genetics are just as diverse throughout the entire range of the fish, well, what we end up with is 102 species by landmass. So I actually did the math. I calculated the total landmass and then the landmass that was studied in that study for the descriptions, which means that there would be 102 species of sculpin undescribed, just that we are calling right now the slimy sculpin. So what we are right now calling a singular species could actually be, assuming, and obviously it's not how speciation works, it's not that linear and you can't just count area and say, oh, there's going to be a species here and a species here. Assuming linear speciesization, which is not an assumption you can make, again, to clarify, there are 100 undiscovered, undescribed species of sculpin just from this one little fuck with the funny face right here, which is why I say that this fish is actually 100 fish. When I caught my own slimy sculpin in Alaska, and when I caught my own slimy sculpin in New Jersey, there's no way those are the same species. Now that's my own theory, of course, but there's just no way those are the same damn species. And so the question is, why haven't we done this yet? There could be 100 new species of fish just across this giant range. The issue is funding mostly. Where does the money come from to do all of that genetic work? It involves a lot of like complex machinery and things like that. So if you want to help, and this is my call to action, if you live anywhere in this range, okay, I want you to find a slimy sculpin near you, okay? Take detailed pics of all of the fins and the underside and so forth, put them on iNaturalist, okay? Because we may or may not be doing some work to try and do some differentiation and tell how many species there actually are. So if you're interested and you live anywhere in these ranges, just go find one. Take a day, go find one nearby, find a lead, Google it. I'm sure you could find one near you. They're not that hard to find. Take detailed pictures, upload them to iNaturalist, contribute to science. But taxonomic work is a little bit repetitive and painstaking if you do it on your own, which is the reason that it hasn't necessarily happened as of yet, that this, split has not happened and we haven't been able to describe all these species. But just the little bit of funding and work that was done in that little part of Pennsylvania and Maryland discovered 3 new species of fish. 3. Think about how many new species of fish we could describe. Life listers, people who want to catch as many fish species as possible, would go crazy with all the new fish species. So, lastly, I just wanted to show you, this is basically what I mean. This is my local slimy sculpin, which I don't think is a slimy sculpin, in New Jersey. So basically what I did is I took detailed pictures of all the parts of the fish, caudal fin, face, chin and pelvic fins, pectoral fin, first dorsal, and you can see the second dorsal here. Take detailed pics like this, put them on iNaturalist. We will use that data, trust me, because you can count. You can count the little rays here and the separations of the rays, and we can look at all these distinct features, and we may be able to find morphological differences between the populations in different parts of North America. And yeah, this is my local slimy sculpin, which I think is probably not actually a slimy sculpin at all, if I had to guess. So thank you if you do contribute. If not, just take home the cool message that this fish, probably in the next 50 to 100 years of scientific research, will become 100 fish. This thing is going to become so many species. What we know off right now as a slimy sculpin in the next 100 years of research or so is going to probably split into at least like 50 new species. At least that's my theory. I like that one. My voice kind of hurts though, but I like that presentation. Dream bigger, 200 sculpins, but I don't want to go too insane.